recording. Roberto, the floor is yours.
Hello, dear participants. Good morning, good afternoon. Today we are meeting for the last webinar before the Christmas break. And then we will continue, as you know, also in the month of January. So before making the presentation of the two distinguished speakers of today, I would like to share with you the last initiative which has been launched by the Global Network of Water Museums. I think that you can see on the screen the title of the global digital exhibition that we are promoting, I Remember Water. So this is very much linked to the last webinars we organized, especially with the contribution of Alice Chotard on participatory photography, and also the contribution of Robin Weinberg concerning oral history for community engagement. Through this global digital exhibition, we are inviting our members, the members of the Global Network of Water Museums, to share memories, to share their archives, to share, according to the subtitle, to explore our memories of our relationship with water. So the image that you see on the left is a kind of pamphlet for this global digital exhibition, which portrays an old fountain in Mumbai. It was built at the beginning of the 20th century, and it is a typical fountain donated by philanthropists to provide water access to everyone in these big cities. But today, the PIAV, as they are called according in Mumbai, are kind of forgotten relics of our relationship with water. So this is a quite symbolic image, I would say, for inviting the members of our network, but also archives and institutions dealing with water memory to explore together again this important heritage. So after this communication, I'm pleased to leave the floor to Sara to introduce the speakers of today's webinar. Please, Sara.
Thank you very much, Roberto, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. I am very pleased to welcome you to the 9th appointment of the training course Behind Museums. And I thank you for being here with us today, and thank also to the two speakers that I am going to introduce briefly right now. Starting from the first one, well, today we will have the chance to listen to the experience and the experiences from two members of the Global Network of the Water Museums, in particular from the Ecomuseum Martesana and from the Muse, the Museum of Science in Trento. Therefore, please let me introduce the first speaker, which is Edo Bricchetti. And Edo Bricchetti is a humanist and an architect. He has lectured at Politecnico of Milan and Bicocca University in Italy. He is a member of the board of the IWI, Inland Waterways International, and the regional councillor of ICOM. He is the contact person for cultural landscape in the Lombardy Ecomuseum network, where he is also a member of the technical committee. He is a member of the national network of Italian ecomuseums. He is promoter of European projects on tangible, intangible, and landscape cultural heritage, and moreover, he was the creator and designer of Ecomuseo Adda di Leonardo, Ecomuseo Martesana, which is the museum that will be at the center of this intervention, and Ecomuseo Valvarrone, Ecomuseo Valle Spluga, Ecomuseo del Distretto dei Monti e Laghi Briantei. So therefore the ecomuseums of the mountains and lakes of Brianza. The Ministry for Cultural and Environmental Heritage, or National Commission for Industrial Cultural Heritage, awarded him a certificate of merit for his decades of work in the field of industrial archaeology. And as a result of his studies on inland waterways, he was appointed guardian of the waters. Therefore, I am very glad to let the floor to Edo, that today will speak about waterways as vectors of ecomuseums towards the making of community maps. Edo, thank you very much for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for your presentation. Now let's start. I've got 45 minutes, 45 minutes. I'm going to be very, very quick because I'd like to receive questions upon this argument, this theme, which is quite unusual. I share my screen. Okay, you see it?
Yes.
See, okay.
Perfectly, yes.
Allora, the title is this, because waterways are long courses and ecomuseums are territorial open-air museums. So we say this. Okay, there are 5 keywords which we should always keep into consideration. What is water? What is an inland waterway? A living landscape. Finally, ecomuseum and the community map. What is water? Hey, my dear, that is a great question. We have to focus, first of all, some thoughts about this. For example, water flows and never stops, so it can't be limited. Water, said Leonardo da Vinci, who was a great connoisseur of water and a passionate, scientist, water always turns to, he says, lochi bassi, which is low places, without any obstacles in its impetus. I know that there is here a problem about, I have to move on. There are your faces, which you hide the writings. So I start, I move it. If I say, okay, I move to the other screen. And now, once again. Okay.
Maybe, Edo, you can try also to scroll your mouse.
But now you see it?
Yes.
Okay, allora. Water flows. Water is universally represented as such everywhere. That means that water is always water in Europe, in the other continents. Water is everywhere the same. And water is a fundamental, inalienable resource, for example, in the climatic equilibrium. An inland waterway. In the water, means we can group natural, inland waterways, as well as artificial ones, the ones built by man. Encyclopedia Treccani says an inland waterway is a river, canal, lake, or other stretch of water that is not part of a sea. We have in Lombardy a formidable network of canals, which are inland waterways, artificial ones, built by man. We have 140 kilometers of navigable inlets. And they are all open air, with the exception of Inner Circle in Milano, 8 kilometers, which has been filled in with sand and used as a road of great traffic. Now there is a case study to reopen a naviglia inside Milano. So You don't see my mouse, no. So we can sail, navigate from the mountains to the river Po. You see this network. On the red one is Naviglio Grande, the first one. The blue one is Naviglio di Bereguardo, where the scientists just experimented the first lock, the first Vinciana lock. Then we have in Naviglio Martesana the pink one, and then up, the green one, which is Naviglio di Paderno, and the yellow one, which is Naviglio di Pavia. So there is a continuous network of canals. The living landscapes of inland waterways. That's very important because water shapes living landscapes. And the living landscape is a combination, multiform combination of elements, which are places, memories, things, people. All what you see in front of us is just a river Adda within Naviglio di Paderno. You see it, there are the locks. In Naviglio di Paderno, just the one considered by Leonardo Da Vinci, and he used it as a background for example, his painting The Virgin of the Rocks. In fact, there is an Ecomuseum which is called Ecomuseo Adda di Leonardo. The Naviglio allows just to overpass La Fora di Paderno, which is a rocky, course of the river where you can't navigate. So that permitted in 1777 just to join navigation from the Lake di Como to Milano and to the River Po. An important assertion, I always just used it, is the one by Gideon. He says, history is a magical mirror of relationships, and the meaning of history arises in the uncovering of relationships. But these relations will vary with the shifting point of view. That means that you have a point of view, another one has another point of view. So that in place of sporadic events, you should consider the continuity of events. That is what we can see, the continuity of events. Living landscape. Because of its continuous transformations, the landscape becomes historic in a short time. Why? Because it changes from day to day. There is a reality which is mutable. And so landscape is not always the same. It changes. And these relationships are very important to understand the meaning of our life. And so the key words is everyday life, dynamism, ecosystem, that means nothing is isolated, preservation through change. You have to preserve, but don't forget that things change. So it's a great quality just to preserve through the change of the living landscape and things and memories. And in relationship with memories, we have what UNESCO always stresses is the intangible heritage. That means the things, the monuments, people as well that tell stories. So memories are very important because they give the sense of the identity of a place. What you see on your left, for example, is the Lago di San Marco, which is a Naviglio Martesana. It's on the right, there is a great church di San Marco. So there is a recollection, Heriberto, to la Repubblica Veneta. And it has been filled in with sand. Instead of this formidable, water basin, there is a parking area. Awful. Okay, allora, we have considered things, but an important consideration is that the monuments, so something you have to remember, which reminds you of something, there is a little shifting to the people, because Ecomuseum is important because there are people who live and work in this area. So it is the first convention, of UNESCO, which just suggested to draw out our attention on the people, and they are the people who make the landscape a living landscape. So other important keywords, I am very short, is participation, identity, and common activities. That means to participate is not, to inform or being informed. Participation means that you have the faculty, you have the possibility and the chances to intervene in the reality, in your territory where you live, because they are the territorial actors who know very well their heritage. And if I don't know, it's our duty to make them aware of what they have. A consideration, heritage. In Italian, we say patrimonio and so on. But in the English term, heritage means something more. And this is what I want to underline. It means to transmit, something to your heir, to next generation. You have to transmit it, not to keep it, on your own. Identity. Identity is fundamental, because if you don't know who you are, you can't live, you can't participate, you can't feel being a part of a great community. So identifying factors are very inalienable. And then there are activities. Ecomuseum is not a photo. Ecomuseum means that you have to do something, to carry on activities in order to understand, to interpret, but to make it continue in the course of time. Obviously, from a sustainable point of view. Sustainable doesn't mean only, economic or ecological, consideration. It means that your work should be continuous in the course of time. It should not stop. And this is very important. You can keep it always alive. So waterways, we said, as vector of ecomuseums, because a waterway is a continuous stretch line, and ecomuseums are just around this area, along the course of the inland waterway, as well as in the surrounding area, as it is for UNESCO recommendations, which say that you have a nomination area, and then you have the buffer zone, which means the area approaching the area of nomination. That is very important. So we may say that ecomuseums come out from the experience of the open air museum, but with a special attention to the people. So there is a mixture of elements. I remember well in 1968 when I went to Great Britain to see the Iron Bridge Museum. That was one of the first open air museums, followed, for example, by the Ecomuseum Le Creusot of my friend Bergeron. And so from that moment on, we have to consider that the open air museum is not something static. It should be strictly connected with the everyday life of people. So, for the only fact that waterways link everything, link all the villages, facing the canal, so that means that water unites and not divides, and so gives continuity to a living landscape. There had been European projects, water unites. Water unites. That's very important. So, ecomuseum, which means, museum eco, but eco is not ecological. Eco comes from the ancient term, Greek term, which means house. So it's the museum of our house, which is enlarged to the territory. So ecomuseum is a sort of a participatory process, remind participatory, remind the notes I gave you for participation, process to facilitate social, environmental, economic sustainability of a local heritage. So there is the local heritage, which goes into strict connection with the global heritage, because water, as it is universally similar in all countries, in all continents, water is the heritage, which could be local, and it assumes the living landscape, the shape you gave it, but as well as, for example, as Roberto said, the little fountain, you have in other continents. Water is always the same. So ecomuseum as a creative and inclusive best practice for community. A community is formed not only by some people, but there are all the people who live, the people who work, who stakeholders, local authorities, just the people who have been demanded to govern, institutions, cultural, everything, and associations. The magic word is association. That means you have not a single, point of view, but you have a different points of view. Here you see, for example, an example of stakeholders who just made a sort of event along in Naviglio Grande. They presented all the kind of boats just to say, let's navigate. We can navigate even, along the canal. The Lombard canals have been used strategically for commerce, and they contributed to make Lombardy great. But now with the modernity, we think we can't, we can just leave the canals on their own. No, it's not, because the canals are very important, because first of all, upon water you can't build up, first of all. Then they are formidable corridors, blue corridors, who help us to preserve nature and historical things. And that does not mean that ancient things are worse than the modern ones. It's the contrary. The modern ones could have a special impulse from the comprehension of how the man just created his living landscape. Ecomuseum is an innovative territorial formula for fieldworks, to work on the field, but to build up laboratories, and above all, observatories. Here in Lombardy, finally, and Italy as well, the institutions understood very well that ecomuseum observatories are very important when, for example, they plan a strategic, landscape, planning, because it's just the territorial actors who know the territory very well. But first of all, what can museums, play? They can play an important role in the repopulation process of marginal areas. For example, the outskirts, even in the urban context. If you give new value to the old landscapes, you can give a formidable help to understand how to act better in the future, because it combines lifestyles, skills, sensitivity to the cultural expression of the local tradition. because the cultural aspect is always neglected, but it's a sum, you know, of everything, because you can say a cultural landscape, because a cultural landscape is formed up by work, everyday life, art, representation, and so on. Here you see, for example, some men, you know, who are fishing in Naviglio, along La Cerchia Interna de Navigli, just the 8 kilometers which have been filled in with sand, and we want to reopen them as a formidable tool against the challenge, climatic challenge. For example, we had just carried on a world event about the question, you know, can ecomuseums do something for the climate action? So here is a tree, an icon, you know, a tree, and we made a great world event, and we just spoke about our best practice. And we understood that ecomuseums can contribute very much to the climatic challenge. But I do not want to deepen it. I want to be very, very quick. Now let's consider, for example, one of the Ecomuseum, which is a member of the World Waterways. For example, here you see in Naviglio Martesana. The Ecomuseum has just been instituted on the 6th of May 2016. You see the white line, that is Naviglio, which, you know, unites the River Adda to Milano, and it contributed to give water to La Cerchia Interna. The green zone, we could say it's the nomination, as UNESCO just stated. And up in the yellow, there are the dry lands. On the bottom, the wetlands. That means that water, when it passes from the dry lands, which are rocky, you know, ground, which is a rocky ground, to the wetlands, which is a sort of bed of argilla, the water which penetrates the dry lands, when it encounters the wetlands, it emerges, and that is a zone of fontanili, a very extensive network of canals, little canals, small canals, so on, which gave to our agricultural fields a great opportunity. In fact, it's a rural area where there are a lot of cascine, rural haciendas. Mind that Naviglio Martesana was constructed in only 6 years, in 1457, 1463. And La Scuola Idraulica Lombarda just drew it at just between the two ecosystems of the dry lands and wetlands. Moreover, the blue one is in Naviglio Martesana, inside the urban conquest metropolis Milano. What's for an ecomuseum? So we say, what do we need, for the institution, of an ecomuseum? First of all, a statute. That means that you should clearly state your mission. So I want an ecomuseum because my mission is, there could be thematic, ecomuseums, for example, water, iron work, and so on. But there are, which are more numerous, the territorial ecomuseums, which means that you consider a part of territory from to. It's very important, just a point to territory, to limit it. Because if you just draw a line, That means that you understand very well what are the identities of the Ecomuseum and your mission. Heritage, obvious, tangible, intangible, landscape, heritage. Mind, heritage, it means, passing from one generation to the other generation. 4-point rules of engagement and involvement of the local community. This is the crucial point. How can we make people participate? Because our defect is just when we work on the ecomuseums, we are just the specialist. It's not an ecomuseum. We are a tool to help the community to feel, in the community as well, with a special identity of work, lifestyle, and so on. And this is the crucial point, because ecomuseums are different. Just the good ones are the ones who think of how to involve community with events, with everything. Activity and human and territorial resources. It's very important, because we are part of ecomuseums, but we should carry on activities, otherwise we are only an icon. What human people work in the ecomuseum? How are our territorial resources? Planning, the other crucial point. If you don't plan, that means that you don't have a strategic vision. If you are not able to plan, it's useless to make an ecomuseum, because we recognize ourselves as an identity community, but we have to plan. Otherwise, we are a photo which is not active. We should plan. Well, there is a network in 2014, REL, which means a network of the Lombard ecomuseums, which is very active. And when ICOM, just made its congress in Milano, we made a great event, and from that event we wrote a manifesto, strategic manifesto on the Italian ecomuseums. The manifesto aims to contribute to the creation, development, and evolution of ecomuseum experiences that can produce virtuous models of sustainable local development community of practice around common themes and ongoing projects. Itineraries are the veins of our body, because if we don't plan itineraries and we don't link place to place, memory to memory, we are dispersive. And there is a sentence by John Steinbeck I like very much, who says, which he says, the persons don't make voyages. They are the voyages which make the people. and a very important consideration. So when we travel, we are formed. It's not, we just make the voyage. It's the voyage which makes us. Remember the grand tour in the Romantic period, when all persons could just travel to make experience, to understand the sense and the identity of a place. With a soft mobility along the canals, you see some examples, a canoe, bicycle, boat, so on. And above all, soft infrastructures with such as bridges, land points, locks, and so on. And now let's consider, I've got still 14 minutes, I think, towards the community map. Allora, All what I told you before, just to make a sort of frame of the importance of Ecomuseum, which is a formula which has been appreciated very much in Europe. We just carry on a lot of European projects. And the map of community, which comes from the parish map in England, the community map, means a map, which is the identity card of a community. Ecomuseums adopt it, as a formidable tool, instrument to interpret the heritage and its nutrients. It is an open laboratory to educate people towards more consciousness of their heritage. What you see in your photo is not a map of community, but it's something we just contributed to create in a park. And you see the canals, the tracks. We fill in with water, and water just flows, It is technically thought like this. And you have the vision of your network. There is a tower from where we just took the photo, and there are school classes who go there and there are guides and teachers speaking about the network along the canals. So there is introduced a new innovative concept of territory, which is not only the place where people live and work. It's a combining, it's a living landscape, a landscape which should be living and not stand still. But the rendering of the territory, it is as well an orienteering didactic tool. And this way of exploring, representing the territory, contributes to create a sort of virtual platform. You see here on your left a drawing by Leonardo Da Vinci of the Naviglio Martesana Concesa. Well, he didn't know that, but he just made one of the first community map, because he didn't intend only to draw. He inserted elements, the man on the bridge, the woman who is washing, in the canal, the little house, the Rocky Mountain, so on. He introduced and he inserted elements which gave us the identity, the sense of what he saw or what he could see. Here, making a map of community means to start a virtuous and creative process of storytelling, a storytelling which unifies things and people. And above all, there are expectations which are represented here, and obviously it is, from a subjective point of view, through multicultural interdisciplinary steps. So you see here, from La Scuola Primaria Malenza di Bellinzago, you see some pictures, some drawings, the pupils of the first in class, just made. And it's wonderful to understand the colors they used it. Fundamentally, they represented the canal with a blue color. And so this is a joyful point of view. Joyful. The houses are yellow. You see the fields. You see the house with a red roof. You see here on the bottom, the street line for cycling. It's wonderful how they interpreted it. And so the map of community could have different forms, from the professional one to the elementary one. But what is important is that people reason upon their landscape, upon their heritage. And what they give us back is important to understand expectations, feelings, and so on. what is 10 steps. Now I'm going to speak about 10 steps to the making of a community map. Well, the community map is important because it activates a sequence of activities which start from the listening of the community. We have to listen to the community. It starts a participatory process of interpretation. And when you interpret, you can represent. You can't represent without interpreting. The focus is on the community identity. For example, here in this picture, you see ladies, gentlemen who are enjoying their trip along the canal. To fix on the map the milestones to visit the territory. Here, I just put the translation into English. The children just, they just post it. They gave voice to their feelings, to their interpretations. And we should not, think they are useless. On the contrary, because children can see the reality from a sensitive point of view. That is what we lost as adults. Not to forget. And a very important, a phrase, a sentence is sailing between past, present, future, fundamentally. They understood very well because they have not you forced to write. They spontaneously wrote these things after listening, obviously, teachers, experts, and so on, visiting the territories, because all the drawings they just made, they were made from the open air, in the open air. Sailing between past, present, future. Navigando tra passato, presente, futuro. Very, very important. They just built up something very nice, So they worked. And when you work and you concentrate yourself on something, that means you reason. You reason. Because when you draw, you understand what it is and what it could be. A living landscape. Look at this picture. There are people, who are taking, the sunshine, cafe, kebab, Bella Napoli, pizza, and so on. A bridge reunites. And, it's a joyful, living landscape. Allora, first step, when you want to make a community map, you have to involve the community in the project. How? Well, you should have very clear in your mind your mission. Then you expose it to the community. You understand. You give importance to what the community says. Then the second step is to start educational courses for the Ecomuseum facilitators. Obviously, a community is a community. A community is not professional. You need the professional people to educate and then to lead, community on this project. And so you need facilitators. Facilitators are not spontaneous people. They should be formed. Then choose an appropriate methodology and format for questions, interviews, field works. You could do everything from the simple drawings you saw to the digital map. You could involve architects, but it doesn't matter. But you can all the same make a very simple community map as we saw before. Make sure of an appropriate management and coordination through facilitators and scientific consultants, because community, it's quite strange, but it is like this. Community, for example, knows very well what is in their village. not what is in the next one. This is surprising, but it is. So we have to be sure that informations, historical ones, are right. Then you have to start the activities of listening. You need a format. People are not requested to answer your format. The format is useful for you, facilitator, to be sure to cover all the subjects. The first stadium is a silent map. You build up a silent map, very big. It depends on what, if it is digital, it is not important the size, but if it is a paper map, it is a silent map. Then during the interviews, you request the people to put their post-it on it. I remember here my grandmother went to wash blah blah. I remember here there was a place where we played. So put these rememberings of children and adults as well, and you will surprisingly will understand what are the expectations of people, because they could say, here there was, now there isn't, I'd like it will be once again. Look at this picture. It's impressive, you know, the little ships, no? All together. This is another relevant information children give us. All together, not just only one, all together. And there is a bridge which connects the two banks. Mind that the banks are colored in black, which means something which is forced. All school trip, children would very much go on school trip along the canals. You see Gita Turistica, they are looking out from the oblò, they are very standing. There are other ones who are rowing, and there is even a female, you know, a child with his life belt. She's ready to go and swim. And another recurrent element is always the black, you know, the black bank, you know. But there is a cycle track. So 6 point, focusing on the key points of the map. So you have to focus your attention, you facilitator, on the place, site, person, things, and memories which come up from the interviews. And these key points should be systematically organized in thematic categories. So you have an itinerary which is the itinerary of the work, of the faith, of entertainment, of the different activities. Then you have to work on the data and planning. You have to work, and then you draw the map, which could be a paper map or digitalized one. Then, after all this, you have to sum up and to make the text editing. But last but not less important is just to give it back to the community, and above all to being monitored. That means you are able to assume the mutaments. This is i luoghi dell'anima, the places of actions. There is another phrase by Cesare Pavese which is very important, and he says he didn't know, but he anticipated the conception of Ecomuseum, because he said, a village means not to be alone, to know that in the people, in the trees, in the land, there is something which belongs to you. It means that even when you are away, it keeps on waiting for you. It keeps waiting for you. So we asked all the territorial actors to state what was their place of affection, where they wanted to go, they liked to go there because blah, blah, blah. Remembrance, experiences, memories, suggestions, expectations. And very important, the map of community is formed out by these impressions. It's not a photo of a territory. It's not a representation of monuments. It's something alive. For example, here, the places of everyday life. They took up from the drawings, from the drawers, drawings upon, ancient activities. The places of everyday life with the explanation. For example, here we're talking about milk. Well, they say there was blah, 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 who worked and so on. Memory tracks of the everyday life, events, sportive ones, and so on. Legends, stories, activities. Mind that if you expect from the community map a sort of a technical, professional map, you are wrong, because it's another thing. It's something you work on simply. You have to facilitate, not to make people, impressed by or made them responsible for great solutions. No, you put in, post it. It's up to you then to transform it in what you want. For example, here there is a reference to artists, protagonists, who are important for the territory. That means that you read, that you interpret, and then you put your milestone. I finished, Sarah. I hope I've been just in time, 45 minutes. And thanks to everyone from me, Edo Bricchetti.